Hey everybody, I'm George Connolly and welcome to the Scratch Golf Tips YouTube channel. Thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to be talking about improving your golf and staying in tune throughout the off season in those winter months where you may not be lucky enough to head out onto the course. I've got some questions that came in on the Instagram yesterday and some really good questions about staying loose, certain things you can do. I'm going to offer some drills that can keep you and your golf game in tune throughout those winter months. The first question comes from A. Collins50, who asks, what is the best way to practice short game during the winter? There are a few ways to practice short game, and obviously short game consists of both putting and chipping pitching. So let's start off with chipping. Chipping is definitely tricky. If there isn't snow on the ground, you can try and get out in a backyard or maybe a local field. You don't need a hole. All you need to do is just put down what I've done is a head cover. One of my favorite drills to do is just chipping onto a head cover and seeing if you can land the ball directly on the head cover. What you want to pay attention with in chipping isn't where the ball, you want to pay attention to where it ends up, but you can only control where it lands. So that's a great drill to do. There are also a plethora of chipping nets that exist. Those are just nets that you can set up. You can chip from a carpet and try and land it in a net. I will link all the resources that I talk about in this video. They'll be linked in the description. So I'll send a link to nets, which you can find on Amazon and a bunch of other places. And then talking about putting, a lot of putting can be done on carpets, but one thing that I would definitely recommend a lot of people do is invest in a rollout putting mat. You don't have to get the full putting green. I've just got an 8-foot mat here. I got it at Dick's. It's a skills mat. I believe it costs $40. There's a number of mats. You can get a smaller one for maybe $25. You can get a really nice one for closer to $100. I'll link a couple mats down in the description. But if you're going to want to dial in your putting, it's much better to do it on a putting mat because that's a true roll. You also have a hole to aim at and you can get that visual feedback. However, if you don't want to get a putting mat, you can absolutely putt on your carpet. I wouldn't recommend putting on tile or a hardwood floor because that would be like playing Shinnecock back in 2016. But there are a number of ways you can practice on a carpet. I'm gonna put a couple of drills on the screen now that I've posted to the Instagram account. One of my favorite ones is just putting a couple pens or pencils down on the carpet and rolling the ball so that it is in line with those pens and pencils. This is great for distance control. Another drill that I like to do on carpet is shown on the screen here. So there's a number of drills that you can do on carpet, but if you have the opportunity to get a putting mat, I would absolutely recommend that for keeping the short game in check. Box of Bennett on Instagram says, I hit into a net, so how do I know if my shot went straight and was hit solid? This is a great question. You can't see that ball flight once you are hitting into a net. You only have a couple feet and you just can't get a visual for what you're doing in that time. There are a couple of ways to measure impact directly, and one of my favorites, and it's very cost effective, is just putting some foot spray on the club face of whatever club you're hitting. And what that is going to measure is just going to show the ball's imprint on the club face. You can see if you're hitting it thin, fat, off the heel or toe of the club, or you can see if you're getting a center strike. That's a great way to get those idiosyncrasies of your golf swing that you can't see without the ball flight being out there. One thing that you should be able to pick up just naturally is if you're hitting the ball pure, especially with irons off of a mat. You can feel that impact position, and even if you do sky it a little bit or hit it a little bit thin, that should also be something that you can notice in the first couple feet of that ball flight. But you know how it feels when you hit a thin shot. It stings a little bit in the hands. If you hit it fat, especially with a smaller mat, that mat might shift and move off a little bit. So those are a couple of ways that you can easily see what your ball or where that impact is. Another method of tracking your flight that I'll always recommend is getting a FlightScope Mevo. This is a pocket-sized, and when I say pocket-sized, this thing is very, very small. I'll put it up to my eye. This is an iPhone 8, and that is the FlightScope Mevo. This thing, I'm partnered with FlightScope, and it's a great company. The Mevo is an excellent product. It gives you carry, launch angle, ball speed, club head speed, spin rates. All that stuff is really important, and it's something that makes my indoor practice very, very fruitful. I can hit a driver and say, oh, I hit this a little bit off the toe, and then I can see the spin rates that coincide with it. Now, because I am partnered with FlightScope and FlightScope Mevo, there's a link down in the description if you want to look into this. It's a great investment if you want to play a lot of indoor golf. I actually use this on the driving range outdoors as well. It's great for indoor and outdoor use. And you can use code SGT50 and you'll actually get $50 off of your FlightScope Mevo. It's a great deal for a great product. There are plenty of reviews out there on the FlightScope Mevo, but I would absolutely recommend it wholeheartedly. It's a product I believe in greatly. And if you like to get those numbers, I couldn't recommend it anymore. The FlightScope has dialed my irons in so much. My distance control has been excellent just because I can hit 10-7 irons on my FlightScope Mevo. And this is a very accurate monitor. FlightScope is a very reputable company. Bryson DeChambeau, Bubba Watson, those are FlightScope guys. And if Bryson DeChambeau trusts FlightScope with their numbers, I'm sure you can trust them too. So that is a great way where you're indoors, you can still see what your ball is doing in terms of club head speed, ball speed, carry distance, stuff like that. So that's another great way that you can dial in. This is an interesting question from Valdez71S on Instagram. He asks, will extended practice on mats negatively affect my game when I go back outdoors? It definitely can to some extent, and here's why. Even when you're playing off of a mat on an outdoor driving range, you'll notice that it's very forgiving. If you hit a ball fat on a mat, you can generally still hit it pretty well because the club won't be able to dig into that turf. It's just going to slide on it and then you'll come through normally. So if anything, I know that whenever I practice on a mat, I feel like I'm a PGA Tour pro because I'm just hitting all my irons beautifully. But you just need to keep in mind that the mat is not true to grass at all. So keeping that in the back of your mind and understanding that the mat is firm and it's not really going to push off, just understanding those fundamentals is valuable. I'm not going to say don't practice off a mat because hitting off a mat is better than not hitting at all. But just keeping those things in the back of your mind is very important. A question that I've received in a few different ways from a number of people is talking about fitness and flexibility throughout the offseason. And this is very important, and it's something that is overlooked by a lot of people. We saw Bryson obviously get quite large over the COVID shutdown, but I think there's a lot of ways that you can prepare yourself physically for the season, and the biggest one in my opinion is flexibility. I think there's a lot of stretches you can do that are very golf specific that'll just keep you loose throughout the season. I'm going to throw a couple of these stretches on the screen right now, but this is also an initiative that you can take in Googling. Maybe you have a bad back, you want to do some golf specific back stretches. Google that. There's a ton of stuff out there. Just knowing, hey, when I start out the season, I'm usually pretty sore here, or I'm pretty tight here. Just stretching, and I'm not saying you need to go out and stretch for an hour every day, but just keeping that in the back of your mind and getting your stretches in when you can is key. I also will link to a great golf fitness ebook, which I believe is $10. It's not very expensive, and a lot of people use it and like it a lot. That fitness ebook can be completely followed indoors. So if you're looking to really strengthen outside of flexibility, that's another resource that you can look towards. This is an interesting comment I received on the post about off-season golf. Vladimir says he always falls back into bad habits and swings at the beginning of the golf season, and he fixes. The reason that a lot of people will fall into bad habits is because you just haven't played, you haven't swung, and then you're going to go back into what you've already done. And it's a shame because a lot of people will spend a whole season, and then towards the end of the season, they've played so much, they've figured it out, and they have these swing changes, new swing thoughts that are benefiting them. So just trying to really be conscious of what those swing changes were, and then working on them as best you can in the off season. And just keeping them in the back of your mind. If you can practice them, whether it's a putting, chipping, iron, driver, long game, whatever it is, keeping that in the back of your mind, understanding it, and then when you're hitting into a net, or maybe you go out to a local simulator area where you can full swings, play indoors, keeping that in the back of your mind is crucial so that you don't revert back into that bad habit. Obviously, once you do get out there, no matter how much you hit into a mat, you might be a little bit rusty feel-wise, but it's important to just keep those things present in your mind so that once you get back out there, you'll know, okay, this is what I need to do. Now, finally, a lot of the stuff that I just went over is stuff you can do in your house. The things we spoke about being strengthening, flexibility, putting on a carpet, getting a mat, chipping nets. Those are all great. But another resource that should never be overlooked, and these are becoming increasingly popular, are indoor golf warehouses or indoor golf driving ranges. Indoor golf driving ranges, there are some of them. It's a big dome-like structure. They're not as common, but having indoor golf simulators, they are fairly expensive, unfortunately. I think if you go on a nice golf simulator, it could be maybe definitely north of $50 an hour for one bay. So keeping in mind that that is an option, obviously no one has the kind of money to spend 3 hours a day and going there a couple times a week, but just understanding that those are out there. I know that where I am from back home, there's one about 35 minutes away, which if I can get out there, once a month just to hit some shots, it's great technology. You can see, you can play courses. So if you're looking for a good time and maybe to sharpen up the game as well, that's another option that you can go down. So those are some of my tips. I know that the off season is frustrating. Hopefully the weather can turn around quickly and we can be back out on the course as soon as possible. If you have any questions for anything that I've mentioned, you can leave them in the comments below or contact me on any of the social medias for Scratch Golf tips. Feel free to subscribe to the YouTube channel, and once again, any resource that I mentioned throughout this video will be linked in the description, so you can always tune in and look at those. Thank you all again so much for tuning in. Play well and take care.